When I first lived in Arizona, the White Mountain was a horseman's world. Except along a few main routes, it was too rough for wagons. There were no cars. It was too big for foot travel, even sheep herders rode. Thus, by elimination, the county-sized plateau known as the On Top was the exclusive domain of the mounted man, mounted cowman, mounted sheepman, mounted forest officer, mounted trapper, and those unclassified mounted men of unknown origin and uncertain destination, always found on frontiers. It is difficult for this generation to understand this aristocracy of space based upon transport. In winter, the top of the mountain was denied even to the horsemen, for the snow piled deep on the high meadows, and the little canyons, up which the only trails ascended, drifted full to the brim. In May, every canyon roared with an icy torrent, but soon thereafter you could top out, if your horse had the heart to climb half a day through knee-deep mud.
Thanks to Leopold and others like him, there are still lands available for horsemen to experience wilderness and the natural world. The backcountry horse experience can and should be part of natural experiences in which we can immerse ourselves. But as civilization encroaches increasingly on our wild places, and as more and more people demand wildlands experiences, there is a need to care better for the land in the course of those experiences. The use of horses in backcountry locations can be especially hard on the land, as well as on the experience we hope to have on that land. Because so many of us use the land, and because there is relatively little wild land left, it is imperative that impacts by both stock and people be minimized.
Hello, I'm Dick Clark. I'm a backcountry guide in Yellowstone National Park. One of the first considerations that any backcountry travel involves, especially with horses, is the kind of place that you're traveling through. These places are called biomes or ecosystems, but most of us know them as just places. Either in the high alpine country or down along streams, out on the grasslands or riding through desert regions. It's important for us to know where we're at so that we can make the kind of decisions we need to make about taking care of these very special wild places.
The high country above tree line, the alpine and the subalpine, are very fragile areas. Growth is slow here and tolerance range narrow. Soils are shallow. Temperatures are extreme and moisture may be at a premium. Any disturbance is apt to last for a long time. Whenever possible, overnight use ought to be avoided in the high country. Certainly long-term camps should not occur in the Arctic alpine. This is a place to slither through quietly, peacefully, and relatively quickly, staying on existing trails whenever possible. Montane forest areas, on the other hand, are generally more durable than the high country. Soils generally are deeper, though seldom matted. Temperatures and available moisture are moderate. Stock use here can be accommodated. Care should be taken to avoid soil compaction and excavation. This is not a place to tie stock to trees nor to build corrals. Some areas may allow overnight grazing, but prolonged pasturing probably will inundate the vegetation. Meadows and sedge bogs are usually solid areas for stock pastures in mountain areas. The soils are usually deep. Temperatures and moisture are moderate. The drier such areas are, the hardier they are. At the same time, the wetter they are, the more resilient they might be. Stock should be moved often and lengths of stay minimized. The number of days stock are pastured on a meadow should take into account the probability of overgrazing and the likelihood of others camping later in that same area. Streams, creeks, and rivers flowing through any of these environments present their own special concerns. The riparian zone, the banks on either side of these waterways and the wetlands associated, is an area of rich diversity of life and habitat. Camps should be well away from these concourses. Whenever possible, drier areas should be sought for both camps and grazing. Grasslands are the natural area for the horse and his half-sibling, the mule. These areas have been grazed for years and genetically adapted to a level of grazing. The soils are deep usually, and the moisture is moderate. Consequently, true grasslands are quite resilient to stock use and should be sought out whenever possible. Deserts and dry lands are every bit as fragile as the high country. Growth is slow in these harsh environments, and tolerances are low. Alterations and destruction to these areas are slow to heal. Consequently, stock use of dry land should be carefully considered.
We have identified 3 sources of environmental impact from stock use camping: stock handling and retention, campfires and wood fires, and overnight camp impacts from people. There are techniques for minimizing these impacts. The backcountry guide should fill his tool chest with such techniques and then select the appropriate tool or technique for each varying situation. From interviews with practicing low-impact backcountry guides, we have identified 10 principles of stock use camping that minimize impact. Here are a few things those backcountry guides had to say. First, about stock handling and retention.
Mules and horses are roaming animals. They like to travel over a lot of country, and I've found some of the best ways to keep those animals with me in camp is, first of all, train them at home. Make sure they're well halter broke, make sure they work real well with ropes, make sure that they stay in a herd. We keep all of our stock in pastures together all the time. We try not to separate anything or keep them isolated in any way. By keeping them all in one group, they learn to have a pecking order, they learn to stay together, and for that reason it makes them a lot easier to handle in the mountains.
But I like to turn everything completely free as much as I can. I always keep a picket horse, a horse on the end of a picket rope. To ride, I don't mind hunting horses as long as I got a horse to ride. Once in a while we may hobble, depending on what the bugs are doing, depending on where we're camped. But I don't like to even hobble. I like to turn everything free if I can. It makes them happier, and they deal with the country better, and they don't cause as much impact if they are turned free.
I mean, you can show me all the 5 and 6 and 7-year-old horses in the world that you think are safe, and you slam car doors in their face and bump up and down a horse trailer and say this horse is safe and so forth. But something in the backcountry will get him if he's that young. A tree will fall, or something will happen. Bees, you run across a bee's nest on the trail. Something will get that young horse. A 20-year-old horse has done it all. And there's nothing that'll get him. And my horses are dynamite proof.
In selecting techniques for handling and retaining stock in wildlands, these principles are important to remember. 1. The fewer the animals, the less the impact. 2. The less obstructed horses and mules are, the less the impact. 3. The more comfortable the animals, the less the impact. 4. The more conditioned, mature, and trained the stock, the less the impact. Second, campfires and the use of wood fires. How do you lower the impacts using open wood fires?
The campfire is the oldest companion that man has ever had. And I know that there are some areas where it's kind of marginal as far as having campfires, and I can understand that. But I don't agree with some of these people that say there absolutely should not be any campfires. You don't need a barn fire. Right now to this day, I still prepare all my meals over a campfire. But you don't need a very big fire. And I would suggest to outfitters that go into a camp, whether it's in the park or in the national forest or where it is, and if it's a great big fire that's starting to blacken the ground all around it, you need to rehab that area a little bit. If you can find some mounds of dirt where molds have built up or whatever, where you're not going to hurt anything, take that dirt and rehab that fire. Put it back down to a little fire that's just big enough to cook on. That's all you need.
So what we've been doing in the last couple of years now is that we've been carrying a fire pan. That is, we take a piece of metal, a garbage can lid works great. Not bad at all, except the sides aren't quite high enough. But a garbage can lid, if you just take a metal garbage can lid, put it on a couple of rocks, 3 rocks, and put a little dirt in it, and it makes a great fire pan, and easy to carry for a backpacker, and it was pretty easy for us. But we found we wanted one with higher sides because the wind gets to blowing a little bit, you know, and then you have sparks going out in the grass, and you don't like that. So what we did is we built square fire pans. They're about that big square. They have sides about that big, and they stand about 10 inches off the ground or 12 inches off the ground. They have little legs that fold up, and that's how we build our fires in all of those. Some of the advantages are these. First of all, it allows me to build a campfire anywhere. I can build it down on a sandy beach. I can build it up in the grass. I can build it over in the timber. I can build it almost anywhere. Second of all, it allows me to build a campfire, and if the wind happens to be blowing away from camp, that's great. But if it happens to be blowing right through camp, I can pick up the fire pan, carry it to the other side of the camp. So I can move my fire pan. Now the third thing is, if I start to see where, that is, if it's a real cold, wet, rainy day, people stand around the fire a lot. Well, when they do, they start to make mark around there. You know, they start to trample everything down. All the forbs and the grasses are all smashed down, and pretty soon it's mud. This allows me to pick up that fire pan and move it 3 or 4 times during the day, and allows me to scatter the use over a large area.
You get into a condition like this where it's wet and cold, and you need wood, and you need good wood, and you need wood that's going to burn and warm people up and cook, you know, expediently and efficiently. It's got to be standing dead wood. That's all there is to it. You can't collect stuff off the ground and expect to make an efficient cook fire of it. We'll find a tree back in the woods that's dead and has a big crack running through it, and it's ready to go down anyway. And so we don't leave a stump. We push the darn thing plumb over and take the roots out of the ground and cut it off and use it completely up. And then we think that this is something that minimizes impact.
In selecting techniques for the use of wood fires, these principles are important. 1. The fewer the number of campfires at each site, the less the impact. 2. The smaller the campfire, the less the impact. 3rd, overnight camping with guests. What do you do to lower the impacts of overnight camping with guests?
No, there's nothing more aggravating than to go into a campsite and to set up and so forth, and then find out that in the woods, you know, right there outside the camp is toilet paper on the surface of the ground or whatever. The Park Service and the Forest Service have different recommendations for human waste, and some of those recommendations include the cat method. But I'll tell you, I don't buy it. I build a pit latrine whether I have 2 guests or 10 guests. It's just the only way to fly. And I've been doing this for lots of years, and I can go back to a pit latrine that I dug and covered up after we left, after being in a campsite 2 or 3 nights, and go back to that site a year later and dig it out, and it's dirt. And I'm talking a hole that I've dug that's 2 feet deep.
I found a piece of material that allows water and air to pass through it. It's a real light filter cloth type material. We spread that down in the heavy traffic areas, such as the kitchen area where we're doing a lot of cooking, such as around the campfire. And we'll just stretch that on the grass, spike it down with 4 or 5 spikes, regular 60 penny spikes, and let the people walk on that.
There's a lot to think about when you're taking people in the backcountry. We could go along with the regulations of the different agencies and make the people comfortable, make your stock comfortable, and have fun yourself. Because if you're not having a good time, nobody that's with you is going to.
In selecting techniques for reducing the impacts of overnight camping with guests, these principles are important. 1. The more human refuse and waste that can be recycled, reused, and/or removed, the less the impact. 2. The lower the visibility of people, stock, and camps, the lower the impact. 3. The lower the audibility of people and stock, the lower the impact. 4. The less the compaction of camp and pasture floors, the lower the impact. For your outfitted traveling camp, planning and preparation are essential. They are prerequisite to applying the 10 principles of low-impact wildlands horsepacking. You should refer to the operating plan of your outfitter and consult with your backcountry ranger regarding local conditions, including weather and updates on trails and campsites. Stock and equipment must be in top shape. Routes and itineraries must be previously determined. Menus should be planned and lists double-checked. The essential ingredients for low-impact wildlands horsepacking are planning and preparation.